You're listening to On the Margins with me, Dan O'Sullivan.
And me, Eamon Stack-Mulvihill.
In this podcast, we will examine sites of education which are off the beaten track, non-traditional, non-typical, but diverse and exceptional, looking at learners who are often marginalised and ignored. Okay, we're delighted to be joined today by Anita Dooley. She's Head of Education in Limerick Prison. Anita, thank you so very much for coming here today and giving up your time. And you've a big notebook there full of notes, so you've obviously been doing loads and loads of homework, so we're really grateful to you for the effort you put in. I suppose, could you share a bit about your background and what led you to become a prison educator?
I will. I started teaching in Dublin in 1992. Well, actually, I kind of a checkered background. I started off teaching in a fabulous boys' boarding school and went from there to a disadvantaged school in Dublin for 2 years. And that got me then, but there was no full-time jobs back then. So I ended up in Loughlin House, which is an open prison in Cavan, in 1995. And I spent 5 years there and went from there to the Midlands prison, where I was for 19 years. And went from there to Limerick via 1 year running a course. I suppose it was kind of like a course to a diversion course for the probation service. And then I started in Limerick 5 years ago as the head teacher. So nearly all my career has been in prison education and different.
So 19 years in the Midlands, that's a life sentence really, is it?
That's what I keep telling them. If I was a prison officer, I'd be out the gap ages ago. The Midlands is very different. There's over 900 prisoners, nearly 1,000 I think at this stage. So you have a whole separate prison for sex offenders and a prison for what we would term regulars, but it's a very subjective term. Yes. And then Limerick is different again because it's males and females, 2 prisons in one. So there's just been, I suppose, the way if you're a good prison teacher, you just work with what's in front of you as the person and you don't really care what they're in for at all. So it makes no odds. Definitely with the females, there has to be a lot more empathy because I've only been there 5 years, but their lives are that much more affected by trauma. So they carry a lot of baggage with them, more so than the men. And I suppose I've noticed as well that the men come in and by and large somebody outside is looking after them, be it a mum, a partner, even an ex-partner, but the women are on their own from the minute they hit the gate and they are aware that their children have to be cared for and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, there's learning curves, but like I said, a good prison teacher will acknowledge all those things and will just work with what's in front of you all the time.
And I suppose you don't. You try to avoid the topic of why they're there, even if you do know why they're there.
Yeah, well, particularly in the Midlands because there were so many high profiles and like every, I suppose, major sex offender ended up in the Midlands, and it was very hard not to know. But like that, you don't look it up, you don't ask, they don't talk about it, and it's just really, I'd love people to come in and see the schools because it's banter, it's crack, it's very relaxed. And I know people think they don't deserve education, but that I suppose the question arises like, are the prisons there for retribution or rehabilitation? And very often in the schools, we try and mirror what's acceptable society is. Mm-hmm. So I would chat to them the same way as I chat to you, and I would let them chat back to me as long as there's respect from both sides. And there is boundaries and there's lines drawn, but I mean the same as there is in regular society and in regular chats. And we all the time try and mirror that in the schools.
Lovely. I suppose on that, and from your experiences, would you be able to identify for us what the key differences are between a traditional education setting and the prison education setting?
Yeah, most of our prisoners, the vast majority left school, up to about 40% left school at age 15. Some left as young as 12, male and female. About 40% of that definitely left by 16, 15. They didn't enjoy school for the most part, and there was huge lengthy absences simply because the one size doesn't fit all. And it's an indictment of our system but not of our teachers, because you're putting them all into the one space, you're expecting them all to learn at the one time, at the one level. And the one thing, The prison education system is a completely different module. It's much smaller classes. It's much one. Even when you have a full class, you're still able to do much more one-to-one learning. Every worksheet is adaptable. Everything. We work to the person, not to the subject. So every worksheet, regardless of whether it's a QQI or a Leaving Cert or a Junior Cert, or even a basic literacy worksheet, we will modify it to suit the person if that's needs be. So in a classroom situation like today, we would have had maths. There could be 8, 9 students, and while people will give out that that's a small group, it's 8, 9 adults with various degrees of difficulty and various challenging behaviours, and you have to be aware of that as well while you're teaching. But the teacher there's no 2 people doing the one thing. So she's everything going on from a level 1 QQI right up to there's a lad in our class doing Open University Maths. So she's working between all those levels. But I suppose it's more, we're recognising their strengths rather than calling out their mistakes all the time. And in a school setting, in mainstream, because the teacher has to get through the curriculum, I suppose it's either right or it's wrong. And if you're wrong and you're showed how to do it right and you still don't get it, well, she doesn't have time to keep going back to you, whereas we do. And we kind of play to their strengths, and it's a way of helping them acknowledge that they weren't stupid, that there is stuff they're good at. And sometimes we coax them into school by letting them do crafts or art, even yoga, and then we kind of segue them into the mainstream classes once they're comfortable. It takes a lot to get them up to the school sometimes because of the bad experiences that they've had. But we would find a lot of our elder statesmen encourage the young lads up. And now we have, especially in Limerick, we would be getting at least 3/4 of the prison population up to school. And that's good because the others have to work because the prison has to operate, and they're the workers.
And can I ask you, Anita, I just listening to you speak there, last week we were talking about youth reach and, there's a lot of the same things you'd have kind of on the margins. You'd have smaller classes, a bit less formality, much more customisable. You're using the QQI as opposed to the Junior Cert or the Leaving Cert, or maybe the LCA is figuring in there somewhere. And without complaining about the box ticking that goes on with the QQI, would there be, I'm assuming there's going to be literacy difficulties and things like that. Would you say, I know you said there was people there undertaking Open University courses, but would you say the majority of students there would have fairly complex needs in terms of literacy? And then just in terms of, I was in Mountjoy there in August. I was invited up and we did a tour of the place, and they kind of spoke about the regime there. Different categories of prisoners would have different amounts of time outside of their cell. And I'm wondering then, for your average prisoner, perhaps, I know there'd be different regimes, how much time does the average prisoner get in education a week?
Yeah, it can differ. In Limerick, because we're very much a segregated prison, so we would have D-Wing, and D-Wing get 1 morning per week, D3 get 1 morning, and D4 get 1 morning. And we have an outreach class on the D-Wing floor, D4. But unfortunately, even within D3 and D4, there's further segregation. So only half of D3 maybe can come. And of that then, it's a white card and a red card system. So they get very limited, very, very limited. And then we have B-Wing and C-Wing, and none of the wings can mix. So each get about, I'd say, 2 mornings, 2 afternoons is the way we divided it. So B get 2 mornings and 2 afternoons. And that's divided. We have 2 floors in the school. So the wing is brought up and they can go upstairs or downstairs. So yeah, it's 2, and it would be about 5 hours a day. A full day is about 5 hours.
So approximately speaking, would it be maybe 5, 7, 8 hours of
8
contact time per week? Okay.
Yeah, for a student, yeah.
That must be, I suppose, quite a challenge in terms of, with such a low contact hours, you're still trying to provide teaching to like a massive mixed ability group. Is there any specific tools you use to maybe give those students autonomy over how they'll teach or learn outside of the 5 or 8 hours we said?
Yeah, they're more than welcome to bring materials back themselves if it's educational materials. We have to be, like, we're in a secure environment, so yes. I mean there has to be permission for materials to go back, but we do give them their work. But it's hard to explain. You've been in, and I suppose the school wasn't in operation at the time. When they're up in school, they'll do the work for us, and there's no issue with it, and they will power through work. But it's a different scenario on the landings. The landings are different. It's like a whole other society down there. It's back to being on the landings with the mates and the talk of drugs and the pseudo lawyers that are telling you how to get out of your sentence. So well, you're locked in every evening, but there's a lot of doubling up at the minute, and some of them will read and some of them will do it, but a lot of them don't want to. School is kind of sacred. You know, it's where they come to learn, and it's where they learn the best, so I wouldn't be forcing it on them. But like, it's like, I suppose it's like with the university students. I mean, however well they want to do is on themselves. Like, if you're doing level 4s and 5s, he'll take it back because he knows he can work it in himself. But I wouldn't be pushing to bring level 1s and 2s back, because if you're at a level 1 and level 2, you need all the help you can get. So we would be inclined to keep that within the classroom. If he's doing a level 5 and chances are he wants to get it done within the year, well then yeah, obviously it's self-directed, so he has to take a lot of it back. But the good thing is, whether they're on school or not on school, they can send the stuff back up to me and this teachers anytime they want, and I'll have it corrected. And that's where the good teachers come into play. Like, I've worked now in 3 different prison schools, and it is, a lot of it is down to the teachers and the officers and the kind of you know, how well everybody gets on with each other, the working relationship, especially for the prisoners. But yeah, they'd take more school if they could get more school, definitely. They'd spend all day, every day up with us if they could.
And just to make things clear there for anyone who's listening, because we're all teachers in the education system, we know what level 4 or 5 and level 1, 2 and 3 is. So level 1 to 3 is, well, level 3 would be kind of junior cert, and then 4 and 5 you're leaning more towards the leaving cert, and then anything after that is you know, your degree, your masters and your PhD. So that's just to clarify that. So I wonder, you know, the way their day is so regimented inside the prison, and they're not allowed to make a lot of well, they're not in a position where they can make an awful lot of decisions. When they're released, then is it almost like becoming an adult and going from making 5 decisions a day to making 5,000 decisions in a minute?
So now you've hit it, and I told you not to bring this up. This is my bugbear. This is why I did all these pages of research, so that I wouldn't start. We did a talk, I gave a talk before about active citizenship in the prisons, and I said, you know, within a prison, and I took an example of a lifer, and of a day there could be anything up to 20 agencies willing to hold his hand to get him through the week. So I'm talking not even about education, but IASIO, probation. He might have the psychology, he might have the psychiatrist, he'll have the nurses, he'll have things like Bedford Row, he'll have the Red Cross, all those agencies. And he can link in if he so chooses and if it's available. And if he is going places and we feel that he's making great strides, we'll nearly fight over who'll take him, like who'll have him and who'll do what with him. And like what you're saying, we get him all set up and we get him to actively participate while he's inside. Would you like to do this? This is how you do this. We'll show you as you get stuck, as you go through it. We'll take your hand, we'll show you how to get through it. We won't do it for you, but you have a backup and we're there, and then we leave them out. And that's it. And they make it as far as maybe the intro office, and that's it. There's no, the Irish Penal Reform Trust, I don't know if you've heard of it, they're very strong on this sentence management, sentence planning, and then post-release planning, and to join up the dots. But as of yet, there is no joining up the dots. There's no step down. And an awful lot of people are in prison. I mean, the major factor for recidivism and for long sentences is antisocial behaviours and antisocial associates. But how they start off possibly coming into us is drug and alcohol dependency. And we release them after possibly doing a little bit of a detox, etc. But it becomes a health issue on the outside, but what's a health issue on the outside then becomes a criminal justice issue, because they've nowhere to go. They just go back to the antisocial behaviour, back to the areas of deprivation that isn't ready for them and doesn't have the facilities to cope with them, and then back to their antisocial associates. But we haven't picked that slack yet. We haven't joined those dots. And it's 84,000 to keep one prisoner in jail for a year. Now that doesn't count the education and probation, because we're all funded. I'm not employed by the IPS, I'm employed by the ETB. Rutland is a private rehabilitation rehab centre, and it's 11,000 for a 5-week course. But we're spending 84,000. I mean, we don't need to spend 11,000 on them all, but it would help if we had some linkage. Somebody, there's a great group on Manorant. Now there's a great group called Spare and Nua, Damien Quinn. That's what they do. But again, like Damien's funding would be minimal. We're trying to get him into Limerick now. I'm trying to get a group established. And he can only pick a few of them, but there would be ones that maybe have struggled a few times and have fallen down upon release a few times. And that's basically what they do. They hold their hand until they're established. And there's no harm in that. I mean, you know, we came from environments that even though we went to university and all of that, you still went home. And if you had an issue, you popped it along to your mum and dad. Do you know, you had supports. It's like, I'd often say with our boys and girls, like it's a parallel universe, it's a different universe. And a lot of people just, either they don't want to be aware of it or they're not aware of it. But I do think that that's where we let the system down. There's great works done in the prisons, but the communities aren't ready and aren't able to cope with them once we let them back out.
Lovely. I suppose on that, there's definitely a mismatch between what is done in the Irish system, from how they are treated in prison, and then they're left out almost in the dry to fend for themselves. It seems mad. But is there any countries in the world or examples you're aware of that have a better system, and can you talk to us about those better systems? What are like the key?
Well, look,
key
I
things
suppose
that are
they're always looking to the Swedish model and the Norwegian model, but the education within those systems isn't like it is here. I mean, very often they have maybe 2 teachers that go in and work, but they would have better step down, they would have better detox, they would have better rehabilitative care for post-release, and possibly within the prisons. Like within our prisons, like the detox, it's managed by the health service and by our health service, and that's, you know, it's very, well, it's not even a detox as such, it's a methadone. And, you know, you have nurses trying to manage this methadone. I haven't visited. I know that the IPA is very active in visiting other prisons, the Irish Prison Education Association, and they visit other prisons, and we've had speakers over to talk to us about. But what works well in other places, our system might work better in other ways. Yeah. There's no, like, it would.
There's no easy fixes to this.
No, but I think there would be, like, there would be, and I'm not putting my hand up for this, but there would definitely be, for the European Prison Trust to look at how we take the best bits of all of them.
Exactly. And
maybe mesh this system. It sounds very simplistic, but really when we're spending all this money all the time anyway, should it not be going to writing? Like we're devils in Ireland, we look to England and the English penal system, and it was this and that, and now they're letting them all out and they've no spaces for them, and they're going on and they're only out 2 hours and they're back in, you know.
I looked a lot at this actually during the week because I knew you were coming, and I was looking at the Norwegian system in particular, and like you mentioned Bedford Row there earlier, and that's a family support network for prisoners. But there's also a hotel on Bedford Row, and I was looking at a documentary in Halden Prison in Norway, and the rooms there were nearly as good as the Bedford Hotel, and I was reading the white paper that they had in the 80s, because their prisons weren't as nice.
Yes,
they were the same as ours, and I went to visiting Mountjoy. It's very much, it feels like it was built in the last century.
Absolutely draconian.
You put your arms out. I couldn't get a full extension of my arms, and in their approach, you know, like we have normality. The ETB, the Education and Training Board, still provide the educational services, but I think just the actual physical architecture of the place doesn't lend itself to good mental health, and you know, a really unhappy person can't learn, and if your mental health is under such pressure, and I'm going to ask a horrible question now. I've heard it's ended, but are they still slapping out in the prison?
No, not in Limerick.
Not in Limerick.
Up to, I suppose, about 2 years ago, they closed down A-Wing, and A-Wing was, but it's like. We had prisoners didn't want to move off A-Wing. You know, they this is where they've done their sentences all the time, and this is where their siblings do their sentences. They didn't want to move off A-wing, whereas we built this fabulous new B-wing, and unlike Mountjoy, it's wide open corridors, it's glass everywhere, so there's sunlight coming in all the time. It's a beautiful build, and yet a lot of our cohort are happy to stay on C-wing, which is part of the old jail, still has the winding stairs up to it, but they're happy to stay there. They only move to B if they want to go on what's called enhanced regime. There's 3 sections of a regime within the Irish prisons, but they get, I suppose, comfortable's not the word, but it's what they're used to, and we have stripped away a lot of their, I suppose, societal rights as well. Like, they don't know how to blend in society, so this is like a home from home, and they don't want to be out of their comfort zone. The Norwegian model, they stripped everything and rebuilt, for want of a better word. Like, whereas we did now I don't know if you were ever in Limerick Prison, but the female prison up to last year when we opened the new female was quite like Mountjoy, and actually worse, because my first day visiting it, I couldn't believe that we held prisoners like that. Like, it's like a Victorian jail. It was down in the bowels of the prison. You know, windows up in the roof, more or less, like little windows. Now they're in this new build, and it's beautiful, and it's airy, and it's light, and it's out of this world. It's trauma-informed build.
They've kind of moved away from the panopticon model.
Yeah, it's like the new build is trauma-informed, and they've gone out of their way to, but it's not big enough. And now, even though it's at 134% capacity, it was at 150% capacity because we didn't forward plan enough. Not Limerick, but the Irish government as a whole didn't think, and so is the Docus in Mountjoy. Like, it's completely overcrowded, and that goes against the grain of the trauma-informed prison, because that's where you're supposed to be looking at these issues and what's brought them to here and why they're here. We can't do that, like, if we're packing them in 2 in a cell, you know. So we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot a lot of the time, you know.
Yeah, the overcrowding is definitely an issue. I remember being on my tour of Mountjoy, and I was in a cell, and there was food in the cell above the toilet, and that was and then they said, oh yeah, we bring in a mattress then, and one guy sleeps on the floor, and then you have a choice of in the morning, do you get a bell to the door when it opens, or do you leave your head by the toilet bowl? And the associated problems with that go on in the middle of the night if someone gets up. So I think there's, and I mean, just the actual architecture of the prison could have a lot to do with it.
Well, I think, like, again, in B-wing, it's beautiful build. It's and there's new workshops, and there's all that sort of stuff in it. But, and this, I think, is very true of Limerick. I've not noticed it in the other 2 prisons. Limerick is it's a very local jail, you know, and the boys are local, and they're all, like, they'll stay on C-wing if their local lads are on C-wing, and they won't bother going to B-wing. Now they're trying, and I think it's a good idea, the governor, and that they bring the young lads onto B-wing. They want them to work, they want them to engage in, you know, worthwhile pursuits. So that is slowly changing, and that's a good thing. And C-wing will be done up eventually, and I assume, but we're overcrowded, so we're repurposing A-wing as we speak, and making it
is it
to
almost,
have our prisoners, you know.
Is it almost like when you're in school, if your friend is in a class, you want to be in that class?
Yeah, even if it's the prefab, like, you know, first day in the prefab where it's cold, then rock over to the main build. Yeah, it is. And I suppose, look, it goes back again to, like, the age profile of our prison as well. Like, most of our Limerick boys we'd have a small cohort of under 26 and a larger cohort over 26. And with the guys that are over 26, the sentences are probably that bit longer. So it's about the comfort factor of where you're comfortable. And as you said, they don't have a lot of decisions to make every day. So it's about, where can I do my time with the least hassle, with the least people bugging me, for some of them it's, where's the quieter spot. If C3 is quieter than B2, well, I'm staying on C3. I don't want to be listening to those young lads yapping about their 12-month sentences, you know, and that's fair enough. You know, we'd all be like that. And
then, you know, we mentioned literacy, and you know, if you have literacy difficulties, it can be difficult to get a job when you come out and all the rest of it. But there's other types of literacy then as well. Digital literacy. You know, if you need to do something online and you can't do it, you might take a drastic action that might get you in trouble. And then financial literacy as well, you know, taking kind of predatory loans and this sort of stuff that ends up putting them under financial pressure and ending up back in the same place again. So in terms of just being able to read and write, is there more beneath the surface there?
No, I suppose when I started in the Midlands and even in Lockenhouse, it was easier to hide your literacy difficulties than it is now. I mean, you were grown men and nobody knew they couldn't read and write. And it wasn't just in prison. I mean, you had it I remember hearing stories of, you know, in Busair and lads that were being offered promotions all the time and didn't take them because they were able to do this amount and didn't want the rest, because even though they could read and write, they couldn't do the paperwork. It's probably harder now because, as you said, everything nearly's gone online, and unless they can read and write, they're not going to be able to work online at the best of times. I mean, we would have within the prisons itself a huge cohort still who are pre-level 1, so they might not even know the full alphabet, you know, and it's very hard to ask them or teach them how to access, you know, or brush up on their digital literacy. In terms of the money, there's a cohort there buy and sell you regardless of their literacy difficulties, and they've no problem telling you that. But I think with the youngsters, they're leaving school early and the lure of easy money, you know, it makes up for the lack of education. They don't see it as an issue. I mean, if you're driving around in a fine car and you have money to spend at 18, 19, 20, a prison sentence is nearly worth it, you know, which is sad, you know, but it is, I mean, they tell you that.
Yeah.
You know.
I'm not sure I'd be too worried about the letters of the alphabet if I was driving a Ferrari or anything like that.
Yeah. I think that sometimes they, the money is too easy made, and there's a huge, I suppose maybe it's because of the way they grew up. If I was followed by a squad, I'd be terrified in my car even if I'm doing nothing wrong. Whereas they just regard the Gardaí as yet another part of society that doesn't like them, doesn't get them, and wishes they weren't here. So they don't really have a fear of it. And I think it's the same when they were in school. They felt they weren't respected, so therefore they didn't respect back. So therefore the fear or I suppose, what can this person do for me, that went out the window, you know, and that's where it fell down.
So there's a couple of things going on there. So like when you have difficulty reading, I find people who have literacy difficulties are absolute ninjas at hiding it. So that's a difficulty. But then you're in a classroom, and I suppose in a prison, as much as anywhere else, but probably a lot more in a prison, you have a mask on all the time. You have because you don't want to be seen as weak or because you'd be picked on, and you need to wear a mask just to cope with the harshness of the environment. So then how easy is it I don't mean how easy, I really mean how difficult is it when you're in a classroom and you're trying to, you know, you realise someone might have a literacy difficulty and you're trying to approach it sensitively, but at the same time there's always the danger you'll expose the fact that they can't read to the other people in the classroom. Now, sometimes in my own experience, that can be a problem and not be a problem. It's not a problem if they all kind of realise they're on the same level. But if you have one or two guys then who you know, maybe they might have done the junior cert and, you know, they'd have a good standard, and then they'll be looking down their nose at the other fella who kind of didn't really get much past 6th class.
Yeah, no, I find in the prisons, and it might just be unique to the prisons, they don't actually judge it. You know, they don't judge it. I mean, we will have lads in class that will say straight up, I can't read that. And the rest of them just continue with their work, and the teacher will work on that person. We have one-to-one literacy classes, and at one stage we talked about changing the name of it, but the lads don't mind. They're like, nope, I'm going in here and I'm going to learn to read and write. Some of them will hide it, and some of them will hide it, and some of them will never come out of their comfort zone and learn to read and write. They will stay going to classes where they don't have to read and write, where they possibly, now, unbeknownst to them, the teacher is doing reading and writing with them. We incorporate literacy into all our classes. So even if they think they're just doing cookery, she is actually doing literacy with them, because be it via diagrams, be it via anything on the walls, like even the labelling of the presses, like she is doing it that way. We are doing it that way. But very often they will come in and tell you. We do an interview for every student that's coming to school, and more so the boys than the girls. The boys will tell you straight up, and sometimes they will actually downplay what they do know and will tell you I'm weak, when actually it transpires you're not as weak as you thought you were at all. You know, you're doing very well. So it's not so much, I don't think they're judged by the others for that. They'll be judged for other things, definitely, but not for that.
Okay.
And that's the difference, I think, with that and mainstream school. In mainstream school, they learned how to hide it. Sorry now, but they did learn how to hide it because who they were with weren't their cohort.
Yeah. Now
they're with their cohort, and nobody cares what the other person did or does or how they get on. They're very much in there doing their own thing. They're all in there doing their own thing. You know, like even in the art class, the differences in levels and abilities, but nobody minds. They all just want to get their own stuff done.
So that's one type of stigma. There's another type of stigma associated with just having a criminal record or whatever it is. And probably within the prison, you know, there are certain people they won't mix with or whatever. But society or people who haven't been to prison, and I often hear this, the story of the holiday camp, which after my visit to Mountjoy I completely dismiss as absolute fallacy and nonsense. But it's very hard to make the argument to society in general to fund prisons better and to create better spaces in prison, and then the first thing people will do is to say, well, look at that homeless guy and he hasn't hurt anyone. So making the argument to actually make our prisons more humane and fund them more humanely is difficult.
And that's where the retribution versus rehabilitation argument comes into it. I mean, before I came, there's not much data out there in relation to value for money in terms of prison education, but there was the Rand Corporation in America, and I found this. They did some research, and they found that for every dollar spent on education within the US penal system, it saved the taxpayer $4 to $5 on incarceration as a whole. And I think that speaks to everybody's ears. So while you might not see it in the short term, it really should be visible in the long term. And I think that again is where our step down is needed, because we have equipped them with a newer version of themselves, and we have shown them that they are, more capable than they thought they were. But when they get out, they do need help to stay off the drugs or the drink. They do need help to, go to the course, even if it's only 3 days a week, from 9 to 4. And that's where the fall down is. So that's where, we're funded to do it, but we need other funding in other areas. And then you'll see a drop off in recidivism, but we can't keep doing what we're doing and then wonder why our prison population is increasing all the time. I mean, people have to see there's some correlation there, the way we're working it is now. And then people say, well, they should be doing hard labour. But again, in America, they found that hard labour has at best a very minimal effect on recidivism. So while it might satisfy the public thirst for making them feel their sentence, you're taking away the liberty. The one thing I always say, because all my friends would say, oh, they get everything. During the summer there, when it's lovely and warm, you're having your barbecue and you're having your bottle of beer, they're in bed. They're locked behind a door. Yes, they've done a crime. Yes, they know they've done a crime. Yes, they know the difference between right and wrong. But it goes back to upbringing. It goes back to areas. It goes back to choices made by their parents and their parents' parents. It's not always as simple as they made a choice.
And I suppose a lot of the prisoners will have experienced child abuse and adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. ACEs to beat the band is a phrase I heard before. And I'm just on the notion of hurt people. Is it almost like a response? So some of the offending, particularly in terms of violence.
Yeah, I find this one very difficult because this is just my own personal opinion now. You see, after working with the sex offenders, and people would say, oh, hurt people hurt. But anybody who's, if you speak to anybody that's gone through that childhood trauma, I don't know how you can't remember that trauma before you inflict it on another person. And that stumps me, just personally. I presume every psychologist and psychiatrist, if any of them listen to this now, be like, oh, Anita. But that does...
They're all, Anita, it's subconscious, yeah.
Yeah, they do, and they will be wondering, but in terms of the violence, there are very inherently bad people out there. There are very violent people out there. There are some for whom remorse and empathy just don't exist. And I will say that. But if you have violence visited on you by Gardaí, by anybody else, your natural instinct is to react because you've seen everybody around you react. I mean, we had a case, and I know he won't be listening to this, but he's been brought back in. Now, I don't know what he did, but he was arrested and handcuffed in front of his child, and he was slacked in front. Now, his child is 4, so he's already seen his dad go through this. So, and he's in an area where this happens quite a bit. So, I mean, what's going to be his thinking? How are we going to model his thinking when he goes into, baby infants? And all around him, all the other kids have probably seen this too, and it's very hard to know, how do you change that,
Yeah, that reminds me of a joke. Mrs. Maloney is teaching the class, and she's doing a bit of civics about the guards, and little Johnny writes, the guards are bastards. So her husband is a guard, and so they invite him down to the station, and they have a party for Johnny and all the rest of it, and it's just write a report on the guards now again, and Johnny writes, the guards are sneaky bastards.
Yeah. It is. It's I suppose there's a lot of work done, the JLOs, the juvenile liaison officers within the guards, the community policing, and it's great initiatives, but it's probably not broad reaching enough, and sometimes we do pay lip service, within our organisations. Oh, we're doing this and we're doing this, but are we really? Are we really doing it, or are we just patting ourselves on the back because a little bit of it's being done and we're ticking a box and we're being very good people? But I mean, when you get down to the nitty-gritty of it, really, are we doing it? Are we putting ourselves out there?
And you were talking, so I want to get 2 things kind of definitely covered. One is I found working in Youth Reach that a lot of the kids there, they had a very dismal view of themselves, and I really wanted to challenge that because I thought that would be helpful. And the other thing then is, we're talking about funding of the prisons, make them more humane, better services. If the recidivism rate, it's a hard word to pronounce, is 75 to 90%, no, that's not from Ireland. No, I'm taking
no,
that.
About 66% here.
Yeah, but if
within 3 years.
Yeah, if you were investing in a business that had a 66% failure rate, you'd nearly want to change up what you're doing, and not to be critical of any particular political party, but the increasing of mandatory minimums and all the rest of it, this is all lip service, because the sentence they get very often doesn't bear any relation to how long they actually, well, it bears some relation, but fellas get a very long sentence and there's no space in the prison, and they're out so much sooner. So this lip service done by politicians mightn't actually add up at all. Have you? I know you really wanted to let go on recidivism, so I'm pulling that cord again to see where you go.
No, I agree with you. The model doesn't work, but it doesn't. Elements within the model works, the education element within the model works. But I mean, it only works when we have officers. So if you're short officers, the school is pulled, and that's no fault of education. It's no fault of probation because they won't have officers. Psychology won't have officers. We won't have officers. That's fault of funding from the state because there aren't enough, or they haven't made the job attractive enough. It's like the guards. I mean, nobody wants to be a guard now because the job isn't attractive enough. So that model isn't working either. So, like, why keep repeating the same mistake? Like, why not strip it all down? And if you have to build from the bottom, build from the bottom. But I mean, if you build from the bottom, it'll only take a while because you recognise all the things that are wrong and you just have to try and put them right. I mean, it's very simplistic to me. It's not really rocket science, but it's much easier to not upset the apple cart. We're very slow in Ireland to upset the apple cart. Even as a society, we're very slow. I know one time the governor in Limerick told me I was too vocal, but he's used to me now. I find that, like, we have a lovely working environment in there. Like, we have a lovely school, we have a lovely facility, and if we had the officers, we would be able to offer so much, all day, every day. As it stands, we can only offer 1 floor of a 2-floor school because we don't have enough staff, because the prison doesn't have enough staff, because the IPS doesn't have enough staff, because the escort corps doesn't have enough staff, and that's broken, and that's been broken for ages. And that's not just this government, that's continuous governments. And I don't know, as I said, like, no matter who tells you they're going to do what when they get into power, they'll still sit there and go, Jesus, grand, it's working away, leave it alone, don't poke the bear.
Yeah, which is more politically dangerous, to cut the old age pension or to give money to prisons?
Yeah.
What's I saying? Do you have any success stories or any kind of a way where you can challenge the dismal view that they might have
look,
internalised?
that's what the schools in the prisons do. That's what we do. That's our role. That's all we do. I mean, you come to school, you're definitely going to see a better version of yourself. You're going to end up a better version of yourself. I always think people look for success stories out of prisons, and it has to be the ones that are in the papers, like we talked about, the Norries. Everybody knows the Norries. James was a dote of a prisoner, but he was a handful at the start when he started learning, because again he had a very bad view of himself. There's a Brian O'Rourke, he's an artist now, he came from Limerick Prison. But we always think, you have to look at the smaller successes. Like, our lads do darkness into light every year, which means multiple laps around a yard, and being clocked every time you go around. But they do it, and they raise the money, and they do all that stuff. The crafts teacher, the NICU unit, the Premi baby unit in Limerick, they make the little hats and send them down. They're all success stories, and they all make the lads feel better. The amount of stuff that goes out from Limerick Prison to charity is phenomenal. Lads making quilts. And then on a quantifiable level, I suppose, this year alone, like last year, we had a number of gold medals for the Gashka, and we had a number of silver. In a couple of weeks' time, we are giving what would possibly, he'd be referred to as a bit of a head wreck by the prison service, but he was great when he came to school. He has done his bronze, his silver, his gold. He's completed a QQI full level 3 award. I nominated him for a Traveller Award. He's won it. He's going out a better version of himself. And hopefully he doesn't need huge supports outside, but he has a good wife. He does, and he'll tell you that.
That's the key to happiness for any man, really.
Yeah, and he's in Last Chance Saloon in terms of offending with her.
Yeah.
And James Long will tell you that's what kept him on the straight and narrow after his last sentence. She came in and she told him, you do this again and you're on your own. But that's the support this particular student needs. We have loads of those success stories. We have, within every class, we do personal development and personal effectiveness, but within every class, it's all about the personal development, more so than about the subject that they're learning. It really is. And every teacher, if they're a good prison teacher, will know that.
I'm really impressed to hear about the charity work, and I often find Darkness into Light is definitely something I've been involved with in the past myself. But I can imagine being locked up all day, that depression would be something that would start to gnaw away at your soul a little bit. And I suppose to be able to actually raise money for Pieta House through the Darkness into Light event, I suppose it gives them a little bit of power over that depression. And I know if you kind of want to change, you want to help yourself, the first thing to do is help someone else. Yeah. Almost the altruistic nature of it.
They are very like that. Like, I know I'm very, I suppose, idealistic, but they do want to give back. And it's a big thing. No matter what we look to organise in the school, they'll always look to make a charity event of it or some way of giving back. I mean, you know, we've a prisoner there and he has his own sewing machine. He makes the most beautiful quilts. But they're always for the Dogs Trust, and they're always for the dog shelter here and the homeless shelter here in Limerick. And look, not everybody is born bad. You know, they're born good. It's just circumstances have led them down this path by and large, and they're born into it. You know, and that's the tune I always sing. I mean, people say, oh, they have a choice, but like we would see good in them. We always see good in them, and we always see the banter and the crack, and the personality is huge. But like, to a guard, the personality is challenging. But in our environment, the personality is great crack, you know, and that's what I have to work with, you know. And I think it's a pity that we can't kind of replicate that more on the outside when they are released. Like, even to send some of our lads out, and right, they have qualifications, but to send them into a particular job setting can be very challenging, because their backs, as you said, their backs are up. You know, they're very conscious that they're coming out of prison and that their backs are up. Somebody there kind of monitoring or mentoring would be huge. Yeah. You know, somebody available to mentor. And as you said, depression, a huge number suffer from depression and anxiety, off the charts anxiety, because they just have such dire self-belief that mentoring would be huge. Somebody to go to the minute you feel yourself slipping a little bit. Like, they come to school when they're slipping. They all have teachers that they link in with. We're very conscious that we're not trained in this area, but we're more than happy to listen, and they know they're there. It's very hard for them to go from that caring and nurturing bang out, you know.
I suppose I don't want to be overly critical of the Gardaí either, but it's difficult. There's so many of them retiring and trying to get out that you lose all that experience, you know. But then on the...
Should they jeer me in my house, like, because my brother's a guard, my dad was a prison officer, and then they call me Mother Teresa, like. Because I bring in biscuits. I brought in 35 donuts this morning, like, you know, for the lads, because they brought up a few orders for me yesterday, like, and they'd be like divils because they didn't get brought up today because we'd no officer. So now the donuts are all gone everywhere else, you know.
Oh no. So in terms then, when I was in Mountjoy, this is my whole prison experience, like, the few hours, but there was a lady there, and I can't remember her name, so apologies if she does end up hearing me. I arrived late, and I needed to go to the bathroom because I'd driven up from Limerick, and she accompanied me to the bathroom in case there was an issue with the prisoner when I was on my way, which I found very, very funny, because she was about half the size of me, but I suppose she'd have a relationship built up with these people. But she said to me, what we need to be doing is preparing these guys for long-term unemployment once they leave the prison. And I mean, you can look at that one way and say, you know, you're setting them up to fail there, but in terms of the supports available to people once they leave prison, you really need someone who's going to take a shot and a chance on someone and give them a job when they get out of prison. And even if they're, you know, even before coming to court, if they have a job, it
but
probably
they
go a long
are
way.
a lot of the time coming from areas of long-term unemployment, and they grew up not knowing people who work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Their dads wouldn't have worked, their mums certainly wouldn't have worked. It's like, we can refer them to college, and we have done, but the notion of a 9 to 5 is like, what? Yeah. And how much are you earning? You're only getting that? Like, they think my salary is dismal. Like, you know, I know what she's saying is that we keep them busy inside, and we might have them for years and years, and we've filled up their day, and then we let them out and they're like, oh, can't get a job. And as you said, very few people are willing to take a chance, and that's understandable too. But sometimes, like, a shot is all really some of them need, but there has to be a change in their mindset. And then, as I said, they're going back into the areas that they came from, and nothing has changed there. So are you going to be the only one in your whole cul-de-sac of 30 houses that's working? Yeah. That's going out every day and going to work?
Yeah, you know? And how many businesses are surrounding that 30 houses? Yeah. You know, that you could go and apply for a job, and there's probably a stigma attached to being from that area.
And on the part of the businesses, like, if you've been burgled 15 times buy this.
Yeah.
You know, and you're kind of going, hey lad, now I know your face, I've seen it on CCTV, you know, like, and they know that, like, they tell us that in work. I can't go down there, Jesus, I can't go in there. Like, Limerick, as I said before, is very local. Like, we have guys that never leave their areas. Like, you know, it's a big deal if the My Ross boys are going to South Hill. Oh, no, I can go into South Hill. And I'm like, why can you go into South Hill? Or boys from the island going somewhere else. Like, it's an awfully local scenario we have here. I was trying to explain to them the other day that I was out in Partine.
Yeah.
The lads from My Ross were like, where were you? And I was explaining how I got there, and they were like, I said, I can't think of the name of it. Not for loving of money. Hadn't a clue what I was talking about, you know. They become, I suppose, comfortable in their surroundings, like we all do. But you and I have experiences of breaking out of your norms and breaking out of your comfort zones. And, you know, you have maybe your education, maybe your background to back you up and to give you a bit of a spine in it. But they don't have that, and we've never instilled that in them.
I wonder what they'd make of the bubble here.
The what?
The bubble.
What's the bubble?
Castle Troy.
Oh, sorry. I wouldn't even say they've even, like, well, I know now, I won't go into a story, but one was coming down here fairly regularly, but he sold on the business, shall we say.
Okay, right. I won't ask any more questions on that.
And he was very brave in telling me this.
Anyway, we've taken a lot of your time today, so before we kind of finish up, is there anything you would like to ask us or add to the conversation that we haven't asked you?
No, I think I'd love more people to be able to come in and see prisons and work. I mean, your day in Mountjoy was grand, but it wasn't actually a working day in Mountjoy. I'd love, you know, people come in and they go, we're inclined to bring them over to the female prison in Limerick because it's lovely.
Yeah.
You know, it's beautiful. We weren't as inclined to bring people into the old female prison because it wasn't lovely. But I think, you know, people that come into the prisons, certain people have this notion of prisoners as different than the rest of us, and then they come in and you're sitting in a room and you're yapping to them and like, geez, he was great crack, you know. Or we brought, like, when I was in the Midlands, I remember bringing my two best friends in for a concert one night, and the guy on the front gate thought he'd play a bit of a joke on him, and he kind of, Jim, for a minute, girls, a bit of a situation, there's a break glass situation, which is a panic situation. The two guys like, wow, oh my god, I see he's pulling your legs. And they were nearly disappointed because they nearly had a vision of Breaking Bad or whatever in their head, or one of those mad TV programs. And even when we got up and they sat in with the audience and sat in with the, like, they were entertained. The boys were good crack. They were chatting away like you would normally. But they don't. People don't know that. And I suppose, look, it's all about nurture versus nature, a lot of it. And, you know, we need to look at how we're raising them and start young. Like, if we start pumping money in when they're young, you know.
It's you've really humanised the prisoners there, and I suppose it's very easy to dehumanise them, especially when you've been the victim of a crime, because you've anger wrapped up in that and everything else. But just maybe as a final question, I have had that. Like, you know, I took my kids up to see Ariana Grande one day, and I missed my parking spot, and I ended up down in a not nice area, and three lads in balaclavas crossed the road, and one actually put his hand on the bonnet of my car and stared straight in, and my two girls were young at the time, and I thought, I'm going to have to run you over. I'm not letting you open the car door, I'm going to have to run you over. But he obviously recognised me because he went and tipped at me, and I was like, oh, grand, and I drove off again. But, like, in my head I was thinking, you little fucker, you're no more than 15. And the fella that was on my car bonnet was older, but the two young ones, I was like, Jesus, you know, like, I know where people are coming from. In that moment I thought, yep, you're not getting in my car, you're not getting in my girl, it's going to run you over. So Mother Teresa
slipped big time.
Left the room for a minute.
and then when I went home, and I remember, like, you know, my brother Jeremy, I was, when I was in the Midlands, and one of the lads was from Albania, and he was turning 50 and he'd never had a birthday cake, so I made a birthday cake. And then 2 days later I was followed around Aldi by a lad that was off his head, and he was trying to take my bag, and David went, what are you giving out about? You'll be baking him a birthday cake in 6 months. You know, so, but like I said, like, when they're there and they're in front of you, they're people. You know what I mean?
That's what I was getting to. And you certainly, just from talking to you and what you're doing for the prisoners, I mean, you're not getting paid any more to bake a birthday cake or to bring in the donuts. These are individual acts of kindness that you've taken.
Well, like the teachers do. It's not just me. Like, the maths teacher yesterday was teaching basic addition using sweets.
Yeah.
You know, with a poor old devil, he shouldn't be in jail. There's so many of them now shouldn't be in jail. Mental health is a huge other issue. We're jailing people that really should not be in jail. But this wee lad, sweets. And if you got someone, go on, eat one. Go on, you got right, eat one. Like, it's not that she's trying to, make a child out of him, but it is kind of like, this is how he's learning. So this is what we're doing. And I will say this of nearly all the teachers within the IPS, and I've said it 110 times, it's a niche and you have to like it. And if you don't like it, then you leave it, and they'll all tell you the same thing.
And on that kindness, I had a lecture there today with some of my PME students who are going to go off and become business studies teachers. And we're talking about lesson plans and this and that, and nowhere on the lesson plan, and they've health and safety, they've school bag you can trip over, they've almost everything. There's a lot in there, but nowhere in there is there any space for kindness. And I think you certainly are bringing kindness into a place where there's very little, or maybe, brightening it up a small bit and remembering that the people you're going into are human. I think that's very important for any educator to do.
Oh yeah, well I think whether you're in an ordinary school or a prison school, like, isn't that part of your role? But I do know, like, we're kind of a points driven society now, and teachers are under pressure. I have friends that would love just to, like, they would have never liked my job because they wouldn't have thought they liked my cohort, but now they take my job. I think teachers, from talking to friends, the pressure is just immense. It's too much. It's ridiculous. And I mean, and then this whole, we've dumbed it down, like, that does a disservice to teachers as well. I think we've really, we've done a huge disservice to the profession as a whole, and I think we forget that these kids come into the likes of UL and work their backsides off to get to work with your kids, and they're not doing it because it's the easy option. It's actually one of the harder jobs nowadays, and I do think that scope for, it's lovely when you see, like, my kids went to the local cloister, and like my young one now she's in a county final next week with her teacher. And it's lovely to see the humanity even with the teacher. Like, when she's outside school, it's Louise. When she's in school, it's Miss Larkin. But like, even last night, Miss Larkin wanted her to, will you stay back next Thursday night and for the open night and do the history? And my young one went, Miss, it's Thursday night. And Louise, yeah, Thursday night, Thursday before the final. Oh, fuck it, she says, because she can't get out of training. But that's needed in schools. You can't underestimate the power of that. And I do think kindness definitely across all fronts goes a long way.
Yeah, it's a very important attribute for a teacher to have in my book. Okay, Anita, you are the head of education in Limerick Prison. Thank you so very much for coming in here to talk to myself and Eamon today, and I hope it'll be eye-opening for someone out there.
We'll get more applications. Thank you. Thanks for having me, actually. It's my first podcast.
Thank you for listening to this episode of On the Margins.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please follow and subscribe on all your usual platforms or wherever you get your podcasts.
You can also check us out on our website, aidonthemargins.com, for more info, content and upcoming events. See you soon.